Hi and welcome to a new video of mine. Today we are talking about containers. So not the containers you know on ships, but the containers you can use to capsulate your software and deploy them everywhere. So maybe some of you have heard of Docker Container, which is probably the most famous container software there is, but there are also others, and I think before you get to know or before you start working with Docker containers, you have to know what a container is. And I want to show you a brief intro to containers and just slightly explain to you what containers are. The first question we need to ask ourselves is, what is a container? So a container is, as I said, it's basically a software package. So you can bundle a lot of code, libraries and dependencies together, and you can create this container. And this container contains actually all the necessary runtime resources. So you can basically put a container on every system and just run it, and it can just run the code and the software that's inside of this container. Because the container is a encapsulated mini operating system, I would say, in quotes. That's extremely simplified. So yeah, you just bundle all your software and the necessary dependencies together, and you can create your container and run it basically everywhere. So if we are going back to this extremely simplified example, it is a lightweight virtual machine. So if you haven't watched my video on virtual machines, I'm gonna link it in the corner so you can click it and watch it. But basically a container is a lightweight virtual machine because it doesn't have all the operating system dependencies and operating system stuff inside of it. It just contains the software and the dependencies and works with the operating system of the actual host computer. So what does it look like? It basically looks like this. On the left we have a typical virtual machine layout. So you have the infrastructure which is servers or cloud or a computer, which is on containers and virtual machines the same. Above the infrastructure on the virtual machine side, we have a hypervisor. This hypervisor creates a type of thing that makes the system that is in the virtual machine believe it is actually hardware system. So inside of a virtual machine, the hypervisor projects the hardware to this operating system. And then we have those different operating systems on this one hardware system. So, and then we have all the apps and binaries and stuff installed inside of this operating system on the hardware. So in a container, it's a little bit different. In a container, we have actually on the hardware directly a operating system. So for example, we have a Linux operating system on our hardware. And inside of this operating system, we install the container engine, for example, Docker. And with this container engine, we can run different containers. So instead of having multiple operating systems on a single hardware system, we have this container engine which lets us create different containers. And those containers are much more lightweight than a virtual machine because it just doesn't have to contain the operating system. And that's a huge advantage for containers. So that's basically how you can view containers in comparison to virtual machines. Okay, and the last point I want to tell you is, why would you use a container? So yeah, you have heard a lot of stuff from me now, but basically the most important thing is that it's lightweight and small. So in comparison to a virtual machine which has a whole operating system inside of it, a container doesn't have all that. It just has the basic code or the basic application you want to use and all the dependencies and libraries that are used and needed for this application. Then the second is it's portable or platform independent. So with a virtual machine, you could basically do the same, but it's a little bit more work because you need all the hardware specifications. With a container is so lightweight you can just take it and put it somewhere else, and it doesn't really matter because all the dependencies are inside of this container. So the container just needs the container software and you're good to go. So it's pretty easy to just encapsulate a type of or a part of or a software inside of a container and just deploy it on multiple systems. Then this also gives you flexibility because you can just simply deploy it to multiple systems, which is basically amazing if you have a distributed system setup or network setup. Then you can just take the containers, put it on multiple systems and run it everywhere. And also you have a much more improved utilization of hardware or systems. So in a typical virtual machine case, you have a hardware server and you put on the server 4 different virtual machines. And all the virtual machines do have their own operating system. In some cases this is totally fine and it's needed to have, but in a lot of cases you don't need a separate operating system for every virtual machine. So you can just install one operating system and use containers to do the same as the virtual machine does in most of the cases. So you install one operating system, put on this operating system multiple containers and improve and with that you can improve the utilization of the hardware. So you don't have this much resources drained by multiple operating systems. Right. And that's basically what I wanted to tell you about containers. It's a brief introduction. It's not much, and it's overly simplified, I would say. If you want to read more about it, there are huge resources, especially from Docker itself. Check this out. I'm gonna leave a link in the comments or in the info box. And yeah, I hope you still enjoy it and have a better understanding about containers.